Good morning. Welcome back to the Starting Block Live. We are broadcasting day 3 from BTC Prague. It's been an absolutely fantastic couple of days here at this conference. Really great to experience Prague, and we're continuing the conversations with the biggest names in Bitcoin this morning. I'm joined by Giovanni Santostasi. If you don't know him, he has really kind of driven the needle with the concept of the power law and how it pertains to Bitcoin. If you're wondering what the power law is, we're going to talk about that right now. Giovanni, it's a great pleasure to meet you in person, finally. I've been following you online for quite a long time. Been hoping to speak to you about Bitcoin and the power law for more than a year, and now we have the chance.
That's fantastic.
But for people out there that don't know you, can you give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you've done?
So I am a physics PhD. In fact, astrophysics. I worked as a professor for several years in a small university in the US, and then I changed field. I went to neuroscience, working for Northwestern, famous university, and then during that period I discovered Bitcoin, and everybody comes to Bitcoin with different angles. Of course, being a physicist, I look at Bitcoin from a physics angle, and this is when I made several discoveries about Bitcoin's behavior.
Yeah. Let's talk about the power law.
Yes.
First off, what the power law is, and then how you've gone and taken that to model Bitcoin and its valuation over time.
Yeah. So the power law is something that we are very familiar in physics. In fact, we are a little bit too enamored with the power law. One time I saw a shirt that say, I went to a physics conference and all what I got was a lousy power law, because they are so common in nature that we find them everywhere. Okay. And this because there are mechanisms that creates these power laws. And the power law, there are many ways that could explain. So the first level, I would say, it's a very simple relationship between two things, right? One of the simple relationship is when one thing is directly proportional to another. So for example, you have y equal x, right? I have a spring, I stretch the spring, the force that pushes back the spring is proportional to how much I stretch the spring. And then there are many other processes where it's non-linear. So if let's say there is this other process, like for example, the light a star emits, right? Mm-hmm. So if I double the temperature of the sun, yes, the light that it will emit will be 2 times to the power of 4, okay, because the relationship between the light and the temperature in anything, not just a star, but also something that is glowing, like a bulb or something like light bulb, the temperature to the 4th give us how much light is emitted. Okay. So if I double the temperature, I get 16 times more.
Okay.
So this type of relationship where you have one quantity versus another to a power, yes, right, an exponent, is called the power law. Yes. This why I didn't invent the term. It's a technical, yes, term because of that power. And it doesn't seem a big deal, but it is, because what happens if you focus on changes of 10, so big changes, like imagine you have many different stars, right, from a small star all the way a big star with large temperature, and you want to describe this phenomena, and you make a plot of a logarithm. The logarithm gives you that exponent. You take the logarithm of a quantity, let's say 100, that is 10 to the 2, right? 10 times 10, yes, so 10 to the 2. The logarithm gives you that 2. So if you have a number 1,000, the logarithm gives you 3. Yes. So that is something familiar when you're thinking about earthquakes. Earthquakes, we use the Richter scale. Yeah. The Richter scale, like 2, 3, 4, so on. When you change the number, you go from 4 to 5, it's actually a factor of 10.
Yes.
So this is something that people use without thinking. It's a scaling phenomena, we call it in physics. Yeah. So if you're looking at the scale, so these changes of 10, and you make a plot of a logarithm, let's say of a temperature, like I told you before, versus how much light an object emits, you will get a straight line. A straight line is a signature to find this power law. If you get a straight line in a chart where you take the logarithm of a quantity versus the logarithm of the other, that is the trick. Yeah. And that slope of that line is the power. So in this case, it will be 4. The slope is 4.
Yes.
With Bitcoin, you do the same thing. You take the logarithm of the price and the logarithm of time in this case, and you get this beautiful straight line. Now, you will see oscillations, with bubbles, the bottoms, but they oscillate around a very nice straight line that has been there all these years, from day one, basically. And because Bitcoin went through many order of magnitude, it went from being few cents all the way to 100,000. So it's almost like 8 order of magnitude. It is amazing. Not many phenomena go through. It's almost like astronomy, right? Where we go from small little objects all the way to galaxies, etc. Yeah. It's like an astronomical object almost.
Yes.
And if you see a straight line, it's a power law. And the beauty is this, because for a physicist, you think of this, say, there is something consistent here. The phenomena is scaling, is going from one order of magnitude to another magnitude, so from few cents to $1 to 10 to 100,000 in the same way, because a line is a very consistent process, right? It's self-similar. You take a small little chunk of a line, it looks like the entire line. Yes. We call it self-similar or scaling variant.
Yes.
It doesn't change when you change the scale. But it is a beautiful concept because, in a sense, you are saying what Bitcoin is doing now is what Bitcoin was doing 10 years ago or 12 years ago. And what it will do in the future is probably the same what is going now. Yeah. So all what we need for Bitcoin to go to 1 million, to 10 million is for Bitcoin doing exactly what it's doing right now. Yes. It doesn't have to change. You don't need. Many people, when they don't know this, they talk about this mythical event where everybody is going to adopt Bitcoin. No, there is a jump in adoption or whatever. No, Bitcoin needs to do exactly the same thing to go where it's going. You see, it has consequences. Yeah. It's not just some fitting. It's really a framework to understand what Bitcoin is. It's a scaling variant phenomena, very similar to many other phenomena in nature.
Yeah. When it comes to looking at the power law, is 16, 17 years since Bitcoin, the network started,
yes,
enough to extrapolate the power law and then make a very accurate, very accurate prediction of price and value in the next 20 years?
That is a very good question. So we don't have a problem for the price because it went through many, many order of magnitude. It would be nice if we had many order of magnitude in time too. Now, if you express it in days, we have something like close to maybe 6,000 something. I don't remember exactly what is today, but 6,200 days. So that is close to almost 4 order of magnitude, right? Because it's 10,000.
Yes.
So it will be nice if it was more. Now, the interesting thing though, that if you do price versus addresses, that is another power law. It's a beautiful power law where the relationship is square. So every time you double the number of addresses, and address is relevant because it's a proxy, it's a rough proxy for the activity of a network, right? It's proportional to the number of users. So every time you double the number of users, the price goes by a factor of 4. If you triple the number of users, the price goes at 9, and so on.
That's crazy.
It is very beautiful because, again, it's a non-linear process and it's very efficient. You think, I double the number of users, price goes up by 2. No, it goes up by 4. Very efficient. So that is another power law. And in that case, we have many order of magnitude, both in addresses and in price. So that one is a very legit power law. We are just publishing a paper, so many people think, this is pseudoscience, it's some random guy. Well, a random guy that has 30 years experience in analyzing data in at least 3 different fields of science. But it's, right now we signed the paper, we wrote a very nice paper, 20 pages with all kind of tests, all different way of showing that this power law is real, to a real scientific journal, peer review process, and that's been accepted.
Yes.
So it's going to be published soon.
And this is a big deal because it legitimizes taking the power law and applying it to Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And like you were saying to me off air, it takes it from critics or skeptics saying that this is just pseudoscience to the scientific community reviewing the paper and saying the physics and the maths checks out. This isn't just you putting it out there on the internet.
And following along that line, we actually created an institute It's called the Scientific Bitcoin Institute. And the goal is to actually work with academia, work with university. So right now we have an office in Torino, Italy, and we have a local collaboration with the Polytechnic of Turin, that is one of the most prestigious schools in Italy. And they want to work with us to publish all the papers, to study Bitcoin scientifically. So we want to be a hub, international hub, for all different scholars, students who maybe want to do a project, not necessarily on the power law, whatever scientific topic they want to explore, maybe the consumption of energy, how efficient Bitcoin can be in using cheap form of energy, whatever. Somebody wants to write a dissertation on that topic. We have funds to sponsor them, to work with them, to offer different services. So, and maybe also to work with companies, to offer maybe reports on different topics, maybe even government, and having science-based policies. So that is one of the goals of it. I'm very proud of this initiative, and soon we will actually open membership to the public. So if you want to join, support us, we will have different perks, like indicators based on the power law that you will get if you are a member. But you will also support the scientific discovery of Bitcoin, because I think Bitcoin, independently from being an investment, is a beautiful subject, to study, to understand, to explore, and this is the goal of a scientific Bitcoin Institute.
It brings together so many different elements: money, economics, physics, mathematics,
psychology,
computer science.
Incredible.
It really is. You've got a book that's come out, The Physics of Bitcoin. Just for the viewers out there, we'll be putting a few links below the tweet that I put out with the live stream link. So just search for @Gaza_Jenks on X or the Block account. We've retweeted that. And Giovanni and his team will be putting some links to his paper, his book, if you're interested in buying that. But at what point did you kind of, you told me off air that you discovered Bitcoin very early and kind of got into it in around 2012. But at what point did you start looking at the actual protocol and the design and saying, wow, this is like, there's so many amazing elements of physics in this, and then you started researching it?
So almost early on, when I discovered Bitcoin, it was 2012. I read this article that was written by an engineer. It really spoke my language. I could understand all the different aspects of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was $9 at that time, can you imagine? And the guy was saying, he really said that one day Bitcoin will be $1 million. This in 2012.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. And I thought, it's possible. I know it sounds absurd, but I actually did. And they had a chart where they were saying, well, it's an exponential process, but they were wrong on that. But so I started to download data. I was thinking about, I was not convinced about being an exponential, and then actually decided to go in anyway. I put all my pension in Bitcoin at that time. But one day I was sitting thinking about this problem. When you're a scientist and you love a problem, you think about it all the time. You go to the bathroom, you think about the problem, you try to fall asleep, you think about the problem. I think this is what distinguishes a scientist from many other people. We think about this stuff all the time. And then I saw this video that I suggest everybody to see. It's called, you find it on YouTube, The Surprising Math of Cities and Corporations.
Okay.
And it's by a physicist, Jeffrey West. He also wrote a book that, again, everybody should read. It's called Scale. Very simple, talks about this scaling phenomena, their relevance in nature, in society, in economy, and whatever. And it was so I was very familiar with the power laws, but I didn't know that they were used also in human-made phenomena. In particular, he was mentioning cities. He was saying how, first of all, he described a city as a living organism with, the roads as being the vascular system of a city, and then the communication system as the nervous system. And he was saying cities follow power laws. The economy of city, the GDP, the number of patents, the number of gas stations in a city is a power law. And I was fascinated by that, because I say, whoa, it's not just nature, but also biology. Was also mentioning the same thing in biology. There are many power laws. And then now humans. And when he did connection, I swear, I saw Bitcoin. I saw Bitcoin. My problem that I was thinking, say, I bet that Bitcoin is such a thing. This is my missing piece, what I couldn't figure out. So I went and got all the data, and I started to see power laws. One of the first power law was between price and addresses. It was so clear. Oh, beautiful, fantastic. And this was what happened. Everything went to the right. All the pieces fell together, like in a puzzle. And this was the first discovery. Now later, because I didn't know how addresses were growing. So that was the point. I thought the addresses were growing exponential. I didn't put that together yet. And then in 2017, because it still didn't work, and I was struggling, and so I say, what if everything is a power law? And so I started to actually plot the addresses as a power law of time, and this is when I discovered all the power law. And then that led to price versus time. That is basically the combination of these two things. The addresses are growing with the cube of time. That is exactly like the internet. The internet also grows as the cube of the users. And by the way, also how some viruses spread. The article that we wrote mentioned that basically the way that this information is spreading the community is almost like a virus, a mental virus, right?
Yes.
That is called because, orange peeling, right? This is exactly, I don't know what this pill is, but orange peeling is exactly how we do it, that, like Precisely. It was the spreading of years, and that goes up with the cube. And then the response of a price to the growth of addresses is the square. If you combine the two, you get price to the sixth power. That is what we see, price versus time, the other power law. So it's all power law. Hash rate is a power law. So it's basically price square. Hash rate is price square, that is another power law.
I didn't actually
know
that.
The holding time, so how long people hold Bitcoin is a power law. It's everywhere.
It's
power
beautiful.
law everywhere.
I have this vision in my head of you just drawing the power law and really loving it.
It exactly happened like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. My final question to you, and I'd like, everyone loves price predictions. I don't care too much about that because I genuinely believe that we should all be acquiring Bitcoin because it's a fantastic store of value and it works as a monetary protocol. And in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we will all be using Bitcoin in some way or another. So you forget about the price, just acquire Bitcoin. But the power law exists,
the price is how we go there.
Yes, precisely. Yes. But according to your models, I think I saw you online sort of saying that 1 billion per 1 Bitcoin is a possibility in whatever 20, 30 years time if it follows the power law.
There's not 1 billion. That was actually.
You were trolling someone, maybe.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's much more sober, but still powerful, right?
Yes.
So it's going to be, according to the power law, if we continue on that line that we did for 16 years, and also about prediction, right? First of all, I discovered it in 2017, the one between. So I have been predicting the price pretty correctly in a very mathematical fashion. And usually when you have a scaling phenomena, the scaling phenomena tends to continue because it's about mechanism. There is some powerful mechanism behind how Bitcoin grows that will likely continue in the future. So if we continue this process, we will reach 1 million in 2032. So about 8 years from now. And then another 10 years, so in 20 years from now, Bitcoin will be $10 million. And at that point, I think we start to go to close to a ceiling. So we have to be realistic. People will say $1 billion. It's not. Because by the time Bitcoin is 10 million, so the market cap will be 210 trillions, and that is half of all the real estate. So by the time it goes to 20 million, then it will be all the real estate. And I think this is when what you're talking about, hyper-Bitcoinization basically, where everybody will use Bitcoin, is going to happen. Because at that time, it will be almost impossible to stop Bitcoin, right? It will be such a phenomenon where nations will adopt it. And some nation will say, we are going to peg Bitcoin, our currency to Bitcoin. And this is when very likely we have hyper-Bitcoinization.
I love that though, because a sobering forecast or prediction is kind of what the industry actually needs. And if it's following a power law, and that is what it is, it helps people understand that there's a lot of value in the future.
Exactly.
But it's a gradual process, and this is not a casino. That's not what we're all about right now, you know. But it will be more valuable over time as more and more people adopt it. Giovanni, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. We definitely want you back on the starting block in the next weeks and months as time goes on, because it's such a fascinating topic. I think we probably could have spoken for an hour, but we've got several interviews throughout the morning. If you're interested in the power law and Giovanni, you can find him on X. Your X handle is a little bit complicated.
I know.
So maybe you want to say it to the audience where they can find you online, your different channels.
You can search on X as Giovanni Power Law, you will find me. And we have also a YouTube channel called Quantonomy, and we will post some links, like you say, to the paper and to the book. The book, it's a nice book, 540 pages. It goes deep, but it's also I got a lot of compliments, people saying that it's very readable. So if you are worried about math, it takes the time to explain. There are many boxes where you can learn if you want to learn, otherwise you can skip it. But so it's a work of love. So if you like to get a copy, it will be nice.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you know where to find Giovanni online. We will be taking a short break, and then we'll be back on the starting block right here at BTC Prague with Richard Byworth. Don't go away. We'll be back in a few minutes' time. Welcome back to the Starting Block. We're broadcasting live at BTC Prague. We just had Giovanni on the show to talk to us about the Bitcoin Power Law, and we're shifting gears quite dramatically now. We've got Sam Callahan, great title, Director of Bitcoin Strategy and Research at Orange Bitcoin. Before we get into that, tell us how you got into Bitcoin.
How I got into Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Oh boy. I just kind of always geeked out on financial history. You know, I'd go home and read books on central banking like a psycho. And I love learning about that stuff. So I kind of understood the problem before I discovered Bitcoin. And then honestly, I just read an article one day on Satoshi Nakamoto. And I thought, this is the most interesting, like I couldn't believe it was real, that this person or group of people created this digital money and nobody knew their identity. And at the time he was worth, you know, I think billions of dollars. Yeah. And I just kind of from there, I read Digital Gold by Nathaniel Popper, which was a book, and I just got hooked and then went down the rabbit hole and really never came back up.
Yeah, most people don't.
Yeah.
I started university in 2009 and I watched, I don't know if you ever watched it, Zeitgeist. And,
yeah.
And part of that documentary, right, is explaining how, like, you know, fiat currency works and like the central banking system works. And when I watched that, like, I never learned that at school, you know, and I went to a great school when no one really kind of explained to you that this is how it works. And when it's explained to you, like, fractional reserve banking sounds like an incredibly bad idea.
Yeah, so it's funny because I mean, I was the same way, which was I went to school in 2008. And another documentary around that time was The Four Horsemen. I don't know if you read that one. It's Dominic Frisby. Same like general topics, but another great documentary. You can watch it on YouTube. Similar, it just explains kind of currency debasement, central banking, why the global financial crisis occurred. And that really makes you ask questions, especially being in business school. I'm raising my hand asking, you know, where does the money come from for quantitative easing? What is, you know, where's the money going from the TARP program? You know, asking these questions, and the professors, quite frankly, didn't have good answers. And so that led me to a journey of sound money, Austrian economics. And so again, when I found Bitcoin, I kind of already had that context and background to really run into it and dive deep, because I was like, this could potentially change the world.
Yeah, you're at Orange Bitcoin now, but can you talk to us a bit about your journey in Bitcoin, like different companies you've worked for, what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a principle in Bitcoin, which is proof of work. So I just started sharing my thoughts on Bitcoin publicly. I wrote articles, blog posts, Twitter threads. That caught the attention of a Swan Bitcoin at the time, and they said, "Hey, do you want to work in Bitcoin?" At the time, I was like, "Yeah, like, yes. I don't even care how much you pay me." Like, it was more about, you know, contributing any way you could to drive Bitcoin adoption, because I just think it's a really important technology. And so I joined, and then I was like the 20-something employee at Swan. Saw a lot of growth in that company. Became the lead analyst. Really focused on educating our high net worth clients and institutional clients with data-driven analysis, research, kind of newsletters, a bunch of content. Ran a podcast for a while myself. From there, I joined Battery Finance, which is a private credit fund that's combining Bitcoin and traditional credit assets. So like, so a multifamily office, for instance, is an example. Combine it with Bitcoin. You can do these like dual collateralized loans, which is really interesting what Bitcoin can do when you like plug it into these different loan structures, because it's such a powerful piece of collateral, and then it's uncorrelated. And so that kind of led me to Orange BTC, because I had worked with our CEO, Guy Gomez at Swan. He's born in Sao Paulo, Brazilian. Our co-founder, Giga, they're close friends. He ran a public company in Brazil for over a decade. Yeah. And so I thought the management team actually had the background and the expertise to actually pull something like this off. Yeah. And I wanted to bring better access to the Brazilian market, because they have such issues historically with currency instability, with capital controls. And I think Bitcoin adoption there is really high, actually, and crypto adoption, stablecoin adoption. But the infrastructure is not that mature yet. Yeah. So that creates an opportunity for an institution like ours to kind of fill that void by bringing in better education, building Bitcoin financial services, bringing that to the market, building Bitcoin products, bringing that to the market. And so that's why I joined Orange BTC. We've been public since October, and it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah. As someone that got into Bitcoin for the freedom aspect, what do you think of the sort of gradual financialization and institutionalization of Bitcoin? I know there's a lot of Bitcoiners online that don't love that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily subscribe to that view, so I'm not asking a leading question. I'm genuinely curious because I've been asking a lot of Bitcoiners this, how do you feel about Michael Saylor and Strategy owning a huge amount of Bitcoin and us building kind of traditional financial products backed on Bitcoin? Was it inevitable? And is it a good or a bad thing?
I think it was inevitable. I think this is how you see new assets mature over time. And I think if we wanted Bitcoin to be ingratiated into the traditional financial system, we're going to have to meet investors where they are and build all kinds. There's going to be thousands of different financial products built on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is that foundational asset, that pristine collateral that you can't debase, that doesn't have these risks that other assets have, physical assets.
Yeah.
And you can build on top of that foundation and provide investors with all different types of products. And I think when you understand how the traditional financial system is, the architecture of it, how different pools of capital are siloed and gated, when you're actually in these rooms talking to pension funds, talking to institutional investors, yes, I would love it if they all bought spot Bitcoin, but it's just not realistic. They literally can't. It's just the rules and regulations of the traditional financial system, investment mandates. And so we want to give products to the market that is supported by Bitcoin, but meets them where they are, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a great thing for Bitcoin. Now, I don't know why this is a controversial view for some reason, but I think what Michael Saylor is doing is amazing for Bitcoin. I think what Jack Dorsey is doing for Bitcoin is amazing as well.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a general purpose technology. People come to it for all different types of reasons. An income investor in Los Angeles who's worth $100 million is going to come to it very differently than a protester in an authoritarian regime who's using it for its censorship resistance and different properties like that. All of it's good for Bitcoin adoption. And so I would just say that for Bitcoiners, I would fit in all these different camps, a maximalist, fundamentalist, whatever you want to call it, capitalist. I think it's all good for Bitcoin. And if you're passionate about one of these things, payments, self-custody, digital credit, these different financial products, then focus your time and attention on that and create value for the ecosystem and make that better.
Yeah.
And that's all good for Bitcoin adoption. It's all happening all on the same team.
Yeah. And
I don't think they're conflicting at all.
Yeah.
That's just my view. And so I guess it's a more optimistic, positive view, but I just think everybody's on team Bitcoin.
That's the right way to view it. And Jack Mallers said to me last year as well, he's like, we don't get to choose how people use Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of it, is that it does tick all these boxes. It's money for an individual in a small Bitcoin circular economy, and it's a pristine collateral for, digital credit products. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, even at Orange BTC, I mean, it's more nuanced than people think. We are a Bitcoin treasury company where we hold about almost 4,000 Bitcoin today. We are interested in doing products like digital credit in the future. We just took out a debt deal because we have a large balance sheet to acquire more Bitcoin, and we just did that recently, and it's been great. We've been increasing our Bitcoin yield through our access to the capital markets, but at the same time, we also support institutions like Vintium, which supports Bitcoin core developers. We're also supporting local entrepreneurs that are building Bitcoin financial services. And so it's not this singular thing that, there's a little bit more nuance. It's a lot of benefits to having a public Bitcoin focused company in any local market and having somebody where you can support the other Bitcoiners that are building there, okay? So I just think people are kind of being a little bit closed-minded in terms of what these companies are doing, labeling them, putting them in this little bucket, fighting them. It's like, I just think we're all Bitcoiners. Yeah,
that's good. I'm glad you say that, and I think there needs to be a little bit less sort of tribalism and toxicity in the space, but it's understandable because people are very precious about what Bitcoin is.
Understandable.
But even Safety said this to me last year when I interviewed him. He's like, people project too much onto Bitcoin. You know, like stop telling other people what to do or how to think about Bitcoin. Like it doesn't matter to Bitcoin. It's going to continue what it's doing. The protocol works the way that it works.
Yeah.
My final question to you, because we've got a stacked list of guests joining us. Obviously, Michael Saylor has built like a really fascinating set of financial products. STRC, I think, is obviously the one that's got the most attention over the last year, or 6 months at least. But there's a lot of question marks about the sustainability of it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about Orange BTC and your offering, the treasury company, and how you do what you're doing? And if you think that Saylor's perhaps doing too much and it's going to be too much of a juggling act, and he's either going to have to sell more Bitcoin or dilute his shareholders in some way, and it's always just going to be this crazy juggling act to pay off the perpetual dividends.
Well, you know, I like at Orange BTC, we don't have our own preferred, but I can speak for you know, what strategy is doing. This is my opinion. I'm not on the strategy team. But you know, I have zero problem with them selling Bitcoin at all. Like, it is a liquid asset, and they have like $50-something billion worth. Okay, yeah. And so when you actually run the numbers of Stretch, you know, they say this, but if you run the numbers, they can literally pay the dividend forever if Bitcoin goes up around 3% a year.
Yeah.
All right, which would be horrendous performance given Bitcoin's historical performance. That's not what I think. But that's how little Bitcoin has to go up for them to basically pay the dividends forever.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so I think when people need to consider is that they've built this capital structure for one thing only, and that's to withstand Bitcoin's short-term volatility, because they believe that it will get adopted, it will continue to appreciate, and they can afford to dish out an 11.5% annual yield, because they believe Bitcoin's going to outperform that over the next 10 years and beyond.
Yeah.
And so if you're bullish on Bitcoin, this is a bullish Bitcoin business model.
Yes.
You know, and so you got to look at how they structured the capital structure, and they did it very resilient. Look at how large their Bitcoin balance is relative to their liabilities.
Yeah.
And then look at their treasury operations and the optionality they have there, which is they could raise capital through MSTR, through the different preferred equity products. They could sell Bitcoin. They have stated that they are willing to do maybe derivatives, sell derivatives of Bitcoin. They haven't done that yet, but that's another thing. You can monetize this giant Bitcoin balance sheet and do all different kinds of things with it to service those obligations. And so I think people are really underestimating the resiliency of that capital structure. And if they're bullish on Bitcoin, they should just run those numbers and think, you know, strategy is going to be around for a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's a funny thing, because people are like, he's going to blow up, but I'm also really bullish on Bitcoin. You know, those things don't really align when you actually run the numbers. So I would say Bitcoiners do what we always do, run the numbers.
Yeah.
And if you're bearish on Bitcoin, if you think Bitcoin's going to go, you know, negative 10% a year over the next 10 years, or it's going to go under 3% for the next 10 years, well, that sucks for Bitcoin. You know, I don't believe that. I think Bitcoin's going to continue to get adopted. I think we're nearing this inflection point of institutional adoption, and we're right at this moment where it's going from early innovators to early minority, and that's usually when you have these S-curve moments in new technologies, and I think we're not here yet. And so it's really a sequencing risk when it comes to strategy. You know, Bitcoin could survive and strategy doesn't, because they were wrong about the timing of Bitcoin's success.
Yeah.
But I agree with strategy. It's my view as well that the next 10 years are going to be explosive when it comes to Bitcoin adoption.
Yeah.
Could we be wrong? Yeah. Bitcoin can do whatever it wants.
Yeah.
But I just think when you look at the macro environment, look at fiat currencies, look at the levels of debt in the governments, when you take all these things into account, Bitcoin's value proposition is only getting stronger, and its own network is only getting stronger. So. For all those reasons, I think strategy is building something that is sustainable, because, you know, Bitcoin's not reliant on strategy. Strategy's reliant on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think Bitcoin's never been stronger.
Beautiful. I think that's the perfect way to end the interview. Sam, thank you so much for taking the time. If you're interested in finding more about Orange BTC or Sam. Just search Sam Callahan on X. You'll find him. If you're a Bitcoiner, you're probably already following him. But Sam, thank you so much for taking the time. We're going to be back very shortly with our next interview. Don't go away. We'll be back.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Starting Block. We're broadcasting live from BTC Prague, keeping the conversations going. On day 3, it's the final day of the conference. If you've missed out on any of the action and you want to see some replays, some images from panels here at the conference, you can check that out at BTC Prague on X. They've been posting content and images and recaps of what's been happening here. We've been doing the live desk, having real conversations with real Bitcoiners right here. And we're continuing those conversations with Joe Bryan. We put your title next to your name on the live stream as What's the Problem? And that's really what you're known for now in the Bitcoin community. Talk to me about how you first found Bitcoin before we get on to what's the problem and the virality of that.
Oh, well, I mean, like most people, I rejected it several times.
Yeah.
Until something pushes you over the edge to put in a small amount of work.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people here, that was just COVID.
Yeah.
You know, being locked up in your house and seeing money being given out like confetti to anybody that wanted it, makes you question where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And how you can protect the savings that you've managed to accumulate for your family when someone can just create it for free. And you know, there was a lot of regret there that I didn't spend the small amount of time required earlier in life.
Yeah.
You know, a few years earlier to have then started going down the rabbit hole. But this is a common story for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Most Bitcoiners are like, damn, I wish I discovered this many years earlier,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I think back to my own sort of Bitcoin journey. It started for me in 2017. I was like working as a sports journalist and a broadcaster in South Africa, and one of my friends was doing he was also a journalist and doing some freelance writing online, and Cointelegraph, who I worked for previously, were looking for writers, and I knew a little bit about Bitcoin, so he's like, cool, speak to the editor. They hired me. I just wrote a couple of features every month about Bitcoin. I got paid in Bitcoin, and that's how I got involved in the industry. But my friend actually orange pilled me. I remember being sent my first Bitcoin. It wasn't a whole Bitcoin, obviously, but being sent some sats, and it's still like a seminal memory in my mind. And I'm also like, man, I wish I discovered it sooner. But even when I discovered it in 2017 and got into the industry, it took me 4 years or so to really actually understand what Bitcoin is and why it's so valuable. So it was a learning journey.
Well, you should say thank you to your friend, I guess. You know,
I do often. Yeah.
We all need somebody to help us.
Yeah.
Right? Because we need at least one tap on the shoulder and a little bit of motivation to start learning about Bitcoin. And it gets easier over time.
Yeah.
The chances of you finding that in 2017 with the education wrapper around the understanding of Bitcoin, the accessibility, and even just the tools you use on a day-to-day basis, that would be like night and day compared to 2026.
Yeah.
Right? And 2026 compared to 2035, again, it's going to be like night and day.
Yeah.
And so we're at the point now where we have, I would say, like core personality types that are naturally attracted to Bitcoin. You know, you have random incidences, you know, people who on paper you wouldn't think Bitcoin wouldn't really register with them as being a logical thing, but through chance and coincidence they find it, or they're thrust into a role. But for many people, if you come from a structured thinking background, if you're a systems thinker, cause and effect, logic, not feelings, and you can get to the point fairly quickly where you identify that the system cannot work. And if you're, for example, a heating engineer, and you go to someone's house and there's a hole in the radiator, it's like, this system is not going to work.
Yeah.
I can say as many nice things to the radiator as I want, and maybe put a plaster on it. The system's not going to work, and ultimately it's going to fail.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think we're at the transition period of Bitcoin where we're adding more and more layers of accessibility around it to take it to a point where we can communicate the value of Bitcoin or the understanding of Bitcoin to different people who are starting in different areas.
Yeah.
And it's not technology first, it's not lectures, and it's more stories and real life use cases and more things which allow them to see the humanitarian or the human benefit on a individual or societal level of adopting Bitcoin.
Talk to me about the story behind what's the problem, how you made the video, and just the journey since then.
Well, I didn't plan to make it. I just had to create something for a group of people I'd never met, and I had half an hour to talk about something, and I just wanted to talk about Bitcoin, but not knowing who was going to be in the room, or what level of knowledge they had. I realized I'm not going to be able to explain Bitcoin in 30 minutes to a random group of people I've never met. I thought it would be much better target to aim for after 30 minutes. I want them to learn about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I want them to want to learn about Bitcoin. And so I just made it into a story that assumes no knowledge, and then you, just through natural human thinking, this, then that, this, then that, where the viewer says, well, obviously, at every stage, and you end up in a situation within the video, and I'd encourage anyone who's not watched What's the Problem to watch it. You get to the end, and you're like, well, this is terrible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be on that island. And then you realize that island is just a better version of where we are today.
Yes.
If you're American, and if you're American, that's a better version of how it is in your country. But 2 steps before, you've already decided you wouldn't want to live on that side of the island for obvious reasons. And so the viewer comes to their own conclusion. It's not a lecture, it's just, this is the way it is. And you can agree with it or disagree with it, but if you agree with it, then at least we're all on the same page that there's a problem, and we can share the same vocabulary as to what the problem is.
Yeah.
You may disagree on what the solution is.
Yeah.
You may think, well, actually, I'm not interested in this Bitcoin stuff. I need to own gold or other hard assets, and that's great. That's like the first step.
Yes.
Right? That will protect you to some degree in some circumstances. But when you've reflected on it long enough, I'm confident you end up with arriving at the conclusion that really Bitcoin solves everything.
Yeah.
Because there's really two dimensions here that ultimately everybody needs to solve for. And the first is, how am I actually able to save? However much that is, how am I actually able to save? And the second is, how can I be sure I actually own my savings? And those are the 2 things. So it's the value and ownership. And you can have gold, or you can have an S&P tracker, and you get price performance to some degree, or you can own a house, these sorts of things. But the real ownership comes with permission.
Yeah.
That's that. I can capture the value of my S&P tracker, or I can capture the value of gold if it's in a vault somewhere, or I can capture the value of my rental property if the government says it's okay. Right? That is not the same thing.
Yeah.
And so different people feel pressures on both of those scales at different times, but the gravitational pull on both of those, both from a intellectual reflection perspective as any individual in the world, but also the forcing function of the way that governments are increasingly becoming authoritarian everywhere.
Yes.
Is that everybody ends up in that top right quadrant where I want to protect my wealth to the greatest degree from a financial perspective, and I actually want to own it.
Yeah.
Right? And there's only one thing in that quadrant, and that is Bitcoin.
Yeah. Talk to me about the Michael Saylor story, because I can't remember if you told me this or someone else told me this, but he watched it, and then he was like, you need to come and talk about Bitcoin to everyone at Strategy. Is that what happened?
Well, not quite. I mean, I'm very grateful to Michael for having shared that video with everybody. I didn't even know he'd done it, because he just downloaded the video and reposted it and just wrote what's the problem? And so my phone just blew up at the time, because I wasn't even tagged in it. They were like, Sailor! Which is a very strange experience. But yeah, then Strategy reached out and said, would you mind coming and talking to our staff?
Yeah.
Because Strategy is a big company. They've got, 1,500, 2,000 employees. But it's been a long-running company before Michael Saylor went all in on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so, 95, 99% of the people who work there wouldn't probably class themselves as Bitcoiners.
No. Or let alone know about Bitcoin.
Exactly. And so they were kind enough to invite me, and then I gave a presentation, not what's the problem. That's part of their education, of course, now. But the presentation I gave was to try and join the dots for the staff there to understand what Michael's doing in the wider context of history. Because he's not the first person to do this.
No.
It may seem like he's the first person to do this, but he's not. He's the first person within Bitcoin, but history just repeats. And I didn't think we were going to go down this direction, but in the 1920s after the First World War, Germany was suffering under reparations.
Yeah.
And they started inflating their currency. They started printing more marks, effectively.
Yeah.
And so we all know this from our history books in terms of hyperinflation, the classic case of hyperinflation in the West and in Europe, which we are ourselves going through just at a tenth the speed.
Yes.
Right? It's the same thing, just a tenth the speed. But in that environment, you could be on the wrong side of that, or you could be on the right side of that. And there was a businessman called Hugo Steins. And Hugo Steins was very well connected, so he was close to the political establishment and could access financial markets. And what he did, he realized they're just printing money, right? So if I can borrow that money on a fixed rate basis, and I take that money and I buy hard assets with it. I buy gold, I buy infrastructure companies, I buy industrials, I buy mineral companies. Then my assets are hard to print, they're hard to replicate, but my borrowings get inflated away.
Yeah.
And so over the course of 4 years, he ended up owning a third of all the companies in Germany.
That's crazy.
Right, over 4 years.
Yeah.
And he was, in today's terms, like Elon Musk level wealthy. Because all his debts got inflated away. But the assets he held weren't beyond confiscation. They were rooted to the ground, or they were permissioned in some way.
Yes.
Right, and so, he met an, untimely death. I don't think it was for nefarious reasons, but I think he was just ill. But his empire had already gone sort of bust by that point, because you are subject to the state.
Yes.
Right. If he'd have been able to do that with Bitcoin, he would have had a greater level of protection. It would have been easier to execute, and Michael Saylor is just running effectively the same playbook here.
Yeah.
So this is not the first time, but it will be the last time.
Yeah.
Because in that instance, he wasn't buying Bitcoin; he was buying just the assets. This time, if you're buying Bitcoin, there is nothing after it.
Yeah.
There's not going to be Bitcoin 2. And so when all of these currencies go to zero, whoever ends up holding the Bitcoin has a secure position forever. And so Hugo Steins was known as the inflation king.
Yeah.
At the time. Like Michael Saylor is the inflation king, but he's also the monetization king.
Yeah.
Because what Hugo Steins was buying was already monetized. Bitcoin is not monetized. It is going through a monetization cycle.
Yes.
It's still 0.2% of everything. So you are moving to the final stage of money against a backdrop of an adoption curve and a technology curve and a monetization curve, which is all in your favor.
Yeah.
And so you benefit from the inflation, but you also benefit from the monetization of the asset itself. It's like the double whammy. And so when I was speaking to the staff, just trying to put that in the context of this isn't a new thing, but he's taking it to its natural conclusion.
Yeah. There's obviously been a lot of like critics and a lot of questions in the last, especially the last 2 weeks after Saylor sold some Bitcoin last week, but then, you know, he sold 32 and then bought like over 1,000 the following week. And Bitcoin was already trading down for a number of different reasons. I mean, I don't think anyone attributes Bitcoin dropping substantially because Saylor sold 32 Bitcoin. But I had a conversation with Jack Mallers yesterday, and he was kind of saying like, maybe things are getting a little bit too complicated with his capital stack, and it's just going to be this constant juggling act as to whether you sell Bitcoin or dilute shareholders to, you know, meet your obligations. What's your view on how he's built things from what it was 2 or 3 years ago to what it is today?
Okay. I think if you ask 100 different people in the Bitcoin community, you probably get 100 different answers.
And I have been asking. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. And there seems to be, you know, friction between different camps here in terms of the views of these things.
Yeah.
From my perspective, treasury companies are a natural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because the money's broken.
Yes.
Right? So it's natural for every business ultimately to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and for some to make that as their core purpose, and then find ways to weaponize the financial system to start to drain the fiat swamp.
Yeah.
Is, in my view, what Michael is leading the charge on. Right? Bitcoin is a superior asset. Strategy, in my view, are now closer and closer to being the beneficiaries of the Cantillon effect.
Yeah.
And not being on the losing side of the Cantillon effect, much like Hugo Stein's, where via financial structuring, you can begin to take what is a very volatile asset by its nature, and that's a feature, because you can't go from being worth nothing to being worth everything if you don't have volatility.
Yeah.
But transforming that into a set of products which, when viewed through the eyes of a non-Bitcoiner, so someone who's in the fiat system, and they then compare securities offered by Strategy versus the other things they have as options on the menu, this starts to look quite attractive.
Yeah.
And what you can't do, it's like energy. You can't destroy or create energy. You can just transform it. You can't fully destroy risk. You can just transform it.
Yeah.
And so quite often I find people are talking past each other.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you are owning a treasury company share, you've already given up on the prioritization of one of the two axes.
Yes.
Right? You're looking for the financial performance, but you absolutely don't have the ownership.
Yes.
Right? It takes one stroke of the pen, like we've seen overnight with the US government's decision on Anthropic.
Yeah, crazy.
One stroke of the pen, the treasury company doesn't have any Bitcoin anymore. Right? And in the fullness of time, you can bet your boots that's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And so you have to look at it through the lens of what it is they're actually trying to achieve. And so I can fully see Strategy and the other companies ending up with a suite of products which have effectively transformed the volatility and the monetization cycle of Bitcoin into a set of products that have different features which appeal to people who are not Bitcoiners but are on the fiat side. Right? A higher return with different risks.
Yeah.
They are not riskless.
No.
These are not zero vol products. Like, what makes me uncomfortable is some of the usage of language around this, like no vol, zero vol, riskless.
No.
They are absolutely not.
Yes.
It's just transformed. It's transformed, and it's also transformed on the financial risk perspective, but it still sits on top of the series of promises and trust that you have all the way down.
Yeah.
That financial performance will actually be delivered in the fullness of time because of the stroke of the pen.
Yeah.
Right. There is a lot of hidden risks with all of these things, which you remove by taking things into self-custody.
Yeah.
And so, I think the financial structuring of this suite of securities is amazing, right? And it's the way we drain the fiat system into Bitcoin. but we should also be ensuring as a community that the importance of self-custody is not lost.
Yeah.
And so I would frame it that this viewing treasury companies and Bitcoin derivatives in various forms should be viewed as a supplement, not a substitution
Yes.
for Bitcoin in self-custody.
Yeah. And that, look, we've had lots of different people either at the head of Bitcoin treasury companies or, very close to the top over the last 3 days. And pretty much all of them start off with being like, if you can and you're an individual, you should absolutely buy Bitcoin and put it into cold storage or self-custody it. But I think these products are a lot more sort of aimed at financial institutions now, right? Like institutions that couldn't buy spot Bitcoin, they couldn't get exposure, and that's what people have honed in on, and the products that we've built.
I think it's good that they say that.
Yeah.
I would ask that. What I would like to see is that we can formally say that, but we should also be informally saying that as well.
Yeah.
And it's the use of the informal language around Bitcoiners and people who are interested in Bitcoin to not represent all of the inherent risks that are in these re-engineered products fully. So we should not be saying zero vol.
No.
We should not be saying riskless. We should not be saying it's like a bank account or it's like a money market fund.
Yeah, it's disingenuous.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. The downside convexity risk in these products, this is not a money market fund. It doesn't look like a money market fund. These are not products to buy if you're an 80-year-old grandmother who wants stable yield and no risk.
No.
Absolutely not. Institutional buyers, absolutely. Draining new pools of capital that is stuck within a financial system, dealing with professional investors, brilliant.
Yeah.
Your everyday person thinking this is a replacement for their bank account?
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I like bank accounts, by the way.
No, of course.
It's a different set of risks.
No, but
you may view these products as, well, I would rather get 10% here and wear that downside convexity risk or that capital impairment risk if Bitcoin sells off suddenly, because I view the chance of that as being less than my bank goes under or the government pulls the rug or I get separated from my money. And so everybody, wherever they are in the world, whatever their circumstances and their jurisdiction, needs to make their own decision about balancing those risks.
Yeah.
But we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard when communicating them informally.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for being a voice of reason. There's been a lot of them on the show, but I think it's really good to hear that from you. Joe, for those of you out there that don't follow you and maybe haven't watched the video or want to find out what you're doing going ahead, where can they find you online and what are you doing in the near future?
Well, thank you. I'm at Satmojoe, SATMOJOE on X. But please just go to what'stheproblem.org.
Okay.
Just Google it, you'll see a picture of a Pixar character and a video. Please just watch it and share it with people who haven't yet had their penny drop moment. It can go to anyone, a child, an old person, any background, any race, religion, politics. There are no sharp edges. It will get them within half an hour to the point where I agree with this. I now understand why the world is the way it is, but there's a solution. And now I'm motivated to actually start asking you questions about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or read that first Bitcoin book or watch a Bitcoin video for the first time. And so it's my hope. Bitcoiners around the world already use it as a first point of contact to try and get people to the starting line.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing it if you've done so. If you haven't, please watch it and hopefully it helps you too.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us, Joe. Don't go away. Keep it locked on the starting block. We'll continue broadcasting here at BTC Prague. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Starting Block. We're broadcasting on the final day here at BTC Prague. It's been an absolutely fantastic 3 days. Loads of big name Bitcoiners joining us here on the live stream, and we're wrapping things up over the next couple of hours before we head home and say goodbye to this fantastic event. If you are enjoying the conversations we're having, please like and retweet the live stream as we continue these conversations. This is going to be a very interesting one because my guest today, Nico, is someone I've known for a couple of years on Bitcoin Twitter, and someone who reached out to me and told me his story and how he's been involved in the Bitcoin industry for a very long time in a very unique way. So first things first, Nico, it's great we finally get a chance to do this and sit across from each other. I just want to tell the story very quickly about how we met. So we'd been speaking online for quite a long time, and I don't think either one of us knew. I mean, your X account is a non, right? So most people don't know what you look like. And I was at Bitcoin Vegas last year. We were both standing at the entrance, I think, listening to Ross Ulbricht's speech. And I am doxxed, so you knew what I looked like. And we just happened to be standing next to each other, and you looked over at me, and I kind of glanced at you, and you were like, "Are you Gareth?" And I was like, "Yes." And then that's how we finally met. And it was a really serendipitous thing. But let's take it back. You don't have to tell us too much about yourself because I know you want to protect your privacy in some way. But maybe you can just talk about how you actually found out about Bitcoin many, many years ago.
Sure. Listen, Gareth, thanks for having me on today, okay? Yeah, listen. First of all, we're not representing some billion-dollar portfolio, right? But the truth is, long ago, we grew up in the floppy disk, CD-ROM era of the internet. As a lifelong learner, right, we try to figure out the internet infrastructure, and we were learning and reading books by, Mark Andreessen about just the relationship of the early web. And we were always curious about how companies were born and cultivated and how they grew and the organic relationship of what it meant to the world, right, their product, their service, and the world at large. And so one common theme that we continued to read about was that the exact match and premium internet domain names were becoming very, very important for companies and hobbyists. But we saw the monetization, kind of S-curve and say, well, wait a minute, this isn't just a hobby. This isn't a passion field. This is actually global corporate business. Yeah. And so we saw this for many years, right? First, domain names were free. And then they were $100, I think, for 2 years registration. And so when we found Bitcoin, we had also been studying monetary history for 2 decades, traveling around the world and using different fiat currencies. So we found Bitcoin, and we instantly thought, well, wait a minute, if Bitcoin is real, right, if the Bitcoin network exists and it is growing and it has the potential to be something very interesting, important, revolutionary even, right, we recognized very quickly that the core internet infrastructure hasn't been built yet for Bitcoin, but the relationship would be that the advertising and the marketing initiatives also haven't been created yet, right? Yeah. So it's the chicken and the egg problem. We just knew very early on that, look, if Bitcoin were to survive and be a real thing, that the fundamental foundation, the baseline for everything would be the namespace, right? And so that's how it got started. And we said, well, these are going to be very important. We believe in Bitcoin. And we spoke to Hal Finney before he passed away. We were on the forum when Satoshi was still coding, right? So we were very early. But the truth is, everyone kind of laughed, oh, well, why would we need this domain name, right? Or we have this weird name that we created. It's not very important. But what they fundamentally missed was that the commercial internet was built out using a competitive advantage. And without it, right, the only speculation would be that you are just one of a million other companies doing the exact same thing. Yeah. And so we've held on, and we are very serious. We take it very serious, the Bitcoin ethos. Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, for those of you out there that are maybe just like a little bit unsure, Nico and the people that he works for, I mean, you're largely independent, right? Owns a large amount of very, very premium Bitcoin domains, So I think most people out there understand that the best domains like, food.com, any four-letter word that has a high catchment or high search probability on Google is going to be a very valuable asset to have. And when it comes to Bitcoin, like you said, very early on, you realize this network's going to be transformative. It's going to be the future, and it's going to run on the internet, and people are going to need these domains. And I mean, we've seen things like Bitcoin.com. I think Roger Ver owned that for a really long time. I'm not sure if he still does. And if these domains fall into the wrong hands or are misaligned from Bitcoin's kind of core ethos, that's not good for Bitcoin, the brand, and Bitcoin, the movement.
Yep.
And I think, the conversations we had, it definitely felt like at the end of the day, you've got these assets, you don't necessarily want to build these websites or services or infrastructure to use them, but you also don't want them to go into the wrong hands. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about the journey since you've had these domains and how you've tried to find the right person to buy them from you and take it forward and actually do something meaningful with them.
Yeah, it's actually a great question. So here is the truth, right? So very early on, we did work with some companies. And at the end of the day, right, they were either scams or they were reputable small startups and they didn't have a big budget, they didn't have a big team, or they ran out of funding and they shut down. And so, our philosophy was if we were going to be the exact match portal for, let's say, Bitcoin wallets, every week we can't have a company representing maybe perhaps a phishing link or a company going out of business and constantly rotating these trusted brands that we are representing either through paid or unpaid relationships. And so it's been very difficult working anonymously. And so we were invited, several years in a row to meet and greet with executives, private investors, developers, and at the end of the day, we don't need to sell, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to find a strategic partner or a licensing agreement. We have turned down many offers, right? And at the end of the day, we believe in Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, and we believe that the infrastructure is coming to a crossroads, right? Where everything is institutionalized. We're kind of morphing from a collectible, right, onto store of value, medium of exchange in some parts of the world, unit of account later, right? And so now we're seeing this institutional drive and we're being contacted by literally legacy incumbents from Wall Street and other parts of the world, in the Middle East, even Asia, right? And so as we continue to be a little bit more public facing, it's very important that some of the executives, we won't name drop, who we've spoken to or who we're negotiating with, but we feel it's very important for them to fundamentally understand that, listen, we have free, highly targeted traffic from 200 nations for free. And so, in effect, we have their traffic for Bitcoin wallets, Bitcoin exchanges, right? Infrastructure companies with the Bitcoin network and Bitcoin blockchain companies. And so they spend this time and resources and energy and money building their teams and their product and their brand, et cetera. But there's still this education gap of, we know they're important and we know they're valuable, but what exactly will we do with them and how will we do it? Yeah. And so that's the message that we're trying to convey, that sure, let's explore a licensing agreement for 99 years. Or if it is an acquisition, maybe it's not just one, maybe it's a package of maybe 5 or 6. And so that's kind of the story, and that's where we are.
And you've turned down $1 million and more.
Yes, 7 times now. Yeah, 7 times we've declined 7 figures. So we just fundamentally don't believe that it's aligned with the short-term value and opportunity from a customer acquisition perspective, a brand perspective, and having the ownership of these authoritative, timeless, premium domains that represent the Bitcoin network, right? The Bitcoin network online is bitcoinnetwork.com.
Yeah, exactly. My question to you is, I know I've connected you to some people in the industry through my contacts, but you've also been working really hard to get in conversations with the right people, the Michael Saylors, the Adam Backs of the world. Why does it matter that out and out true Bitcoiners should be the custodians of these domains in your mind?
Yeah, so listen, let me take a step back here. Michael Saylor, what everyone in this building doesn't understand is he did not get introduced to digital scarcity in 2019. Michael Saylor was an expert on digital scarcity 20 years before Bitcoin, came to be, right, before the white paper. And so what I mean by that is he was engaged in the buying of premium exactmatch.com domain names literally decades before Bitcoin. And so I think his light bulb moment might have taken a little bit more to morph it from a monetary technology, but as soon as he understood, wait a minute, right, these two things, digital scarcity on the internet and then digital scarcity from a monetary perspective, it obviously was a very important light bulb moment for him, his business, and the entire world to be, so enthusiastic and kind of taking the industry by the reins.
Yeah. So in your mind, with all, I mean, you've explored numerous avenues, right? Like directly going to people and trying to sell it to them. You've tried to do it on auction. That hasn't worked either. I would imagine auction's actually not the best way to do it, because then you actually don't have control of who ends up owning the assets.
Yeah, so that was the problem, right? So we've worked with private consultants, industry brokers, some attorneys representing companies, even an auction house or two. And unfortunately, listen, there are unscrupulous and nefarious actors all around the world, right?
Yeah.
It's just a part of the world that we live in. At the end of the day, everyone wants a piece of the pie. They want to tell their own story, earn a commission, or potentially engage in nefarious activity where they try to acquire it and pretend it's for a client, then resell it. So that's happened several times, but we've been around for quite some time, right? So with over 20 years of experience in premium domain management and intellectual property, as well as marketing, we kind of know who the players are and who is serious. And when they come to us, listen, we have the non-disclosure agreements, we have all the documents, and $1 million is great, but 10 million is better.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And they're worth that at the very least. I mean, if you just think about, I'm a big advocate for Bitcoin, so perhaps I'm a bit biased in my opinion about it, but I like all the conversations we had, I fundamentally believe the right people should own these kind of assets. And I had a conversation with Paolo Arduino from Tether about a year ago, and I hope he doesn't watch this, because I probably shouldn't tell people that this actually happened, but I'm going to anyway.
It's okay.
We had a conversation, and he told me at one stage he wanted to buy Bitcoin.com from Roger Ver, and he was like, $1 billion. And I mean...
With a B.
With a B. And like, I told my producer Jordan this, I think it was yesterday, and he was like, $1 billion, is it really worth that? And I might say yes. I mean, like, obviously Bitcoin.org is kind of the home, like, is the spiritual home of the white paper, and
right.
We're a quite...
Yep.
Where Bitcoin is represented as it is, whereas the Bitcoin.com website is a commercial website. It had different misaligned interests. I mean, that's a long story, right?
Yep.
But $1 billion for that domain, you're a domain expert.
Yeah.
Is it worth that?
Well, so listen, the vast majority of premium domain names, that are sold around the world, they're not public sales, right? They're private sales. They may come out later down the road, or they might find them in filings, But listen, Bitcoin has grown from nothing to a multi-trillion-dollar asset class. All signs are pointing to, the network effects and just kind of the reality of the space, that this is probably the Bitcoin network is probably going to be representative of 10, 20, 50 trillion dollars in the future, right? So to have an ownership stake of, like you said, Bitcoin.com, which I'm not promoting that in any way, shape, or form because of its kind of checkered past.
Yeah.
The truth is, what is it worth? What is the opportunity cost to own forever the authoritative, one-of-one, provably scarce, censorship-resistant, globally authoritative namespace that cannot be replicated, right? What is that worth? Think about that from a customer acquisition perspective, a brand management. Many of the companies here and in Vegas, right, they have 10, 20, $50 million annual ad budgets.
Yeah.
Okay, so for a tax-deductible, acquisition structure and a little bit of creativity, right? Not to be disrespectful or rude to any entity, but the truth is we have generated 50 million, perhaps 70, 80, 90 million dollars worth of traffic and exposure globally that we did not pay one single penny for.
Yeah.
So there's real value there, right? And so it's just the education gap is still so immense. And so we're working very, very hard with some of the big investors and some of the big brands here to try to figure out, what does this look like in kind of a sandbox environment? And so the offers do continue to come in. We're trying to be very thoughtful through this responsible stewardship for the assets and the intellectual property, because we fundamentally believe, and we've said this to some of the biggest names in the space, I'll let you say their names, not me, but we're at a crossroads, right? Wall Street is knocking on the door. So how silly for us to come all this way and to be great stewards of these assets and intellectual property just to pass them off and pass the torch to, a big Wall Street entity.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
With vested interest and maybe just not much of a care for the Bitcoin network itself and what these domains should be used for. I don't know if you want to at least say to the audience out there or anyone interested, like if they can find more information where they can go and do that, because you've got a load of really interesting domains, high value domains that I think plenty of people in the Bitcoin industry would be interested, and maybe the right people, the right custodians to take ownership of them.
Yeah, sure. So it's been dubbed the Genesis Collection, the 2010 Genesis Collection. And it's effectively a portfolio of IP, approximately 300 Bitcoin-only.com domain names, 16 years, clear provenance, very, very special and unique portfolio. And like I said, the traffic and the representation is timeless, right? We have said the same story in small circles and private circles, online, anonymously. And it's a very important next step for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to get the message out there.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your time.
That's good. Do you want to plug your X account? If people want to find
let me
you?
just say this. If you're interested in reaching out privately, we do have non-disclosure agreements and contracts ready, but we're at various stages of negotiation with several different entities, right? And so it's kind of this ongoing process. You could reach out directly at ip@bitcoinwallets.com.
Okay.
And we can go from there.
Beautiful. Nico, thanks so much for taking the time to chat to me. I know it's been a long time coming, and you've also been a little bit reluctant because you have valued your privacy for a long time. So it's difficult to sit down in front of a camera when you've worked hard to protect your identity for a long time. But I think that it's also important for you to put a face to the name if you want to get through with this. So thanks so much for chatting to me. If you've got any queries or questions, Nico's given you the information. You can find that. Stay right with us here at BTC Prague. We'll be broadcasting for about another hour. We've got a couple more big conversations coming up. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to BTC Prague. We are broadcasting the starting block live. We've been here the last 2 days. It's day 3, the final day, and we're close to wrapping up the live stream with a couple more conversations. I've got a good friend of mine, a fellow journalist, and someone who's pushed the needle for Bitcoin in the UK probably more than anyone else, Susie Violet Ward. It's great to see you in person again, Susie.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I didn't realize this was going to be live. What a surprise.
It's a live stream, so there we go.
Incredible.
Even no pressure. Don't swear too much, please.
No,
no, I'm joking. Yeah, we're here at BTC Prague. I was very pleasantly surprised by how busy this conference is, and I mean it's very much framed in the way of like a Bitcoin-only conference. We've both been to the BTC Inc. conferences. This does very much feel like a Bitcoin-only conference, and there's a shitload of people. It was quite a surprise to me. But yeah, for the audience out there at the block that maybe don't know who you are, maybe you can talk a little bit more about your journalism and then your work co-founding and the director of Bitcoin Policy UK.
So, first and foremost, I'm a Bitcoin journalist. I always think of myself as a Bitcoin journalist because I really like learning about all the different concepts of Bitcoin and then trying to put it in a digestible form, because it's really important to me that we educate properly. Yeah. Mainstream media have just completely ruined that's why I think, feeding into the policy aspect, why we have such poor policy. Because a lot of our policy makers, they read the BBC, they think that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, they think that it's boiling the oceans, that it's only used by criminals, and trying to unwind that damage, I think, is exactly what I see my purpose as being, because when it comes to Brandolini's law, the asymmetry of bullshit, it takes 10 times the magnitude of energy to refute the bullshit than to create it in the first place.
Yes.
Which is why journalism is the most important thing to me in the Bitcoin space. And you probably feel the same, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but I've had nowhere near as much impact as someone like you, because you've taken the advocacy to a much higher level with Bitcoin Policy UK, right? Like, constantly having back and forth with policymakers and challenging various rules and regulations that have been put in place. And it's important that those checks and balances are there, because if it weren't for people like you, it would be 10 times worse than it is. And in the UK, it's not very good anyway. Talk to me a little bit about like the landscape in the UK for Bitcoin, and if you think it's moving in a more positive direction than it was maybe 5 years ago.
It's tricky because our policymakers don't understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. So we have a financial conduct authority who has regulation, and it's same risk, same regulation. But if you don't understand the different risk profiles of, say, a stable coin, Bitcoin, a meme coin, an altcoin, then you can't apply the same regulation to those things, because a meme coin that you can create in 30 seconds is not the same as Bitcoin, which has a 60% market cap and it has a 17-year history. So trying to get past that barrier, you can't have sensible regulation until you understand the different asset types, and putting them in the same bucket, crypto assets, is very, very unhelpful. So that's one of the first things that we have to try and get across. And I think we are maybe making a little bit of progress, although it's exceptionally painful. Another issue is shitcoins can create their own tokens, and then they form their own lobby groups. So we've found it really difficult to get funding because we're Bitcoin only, or the companies that we speak to think if you go to a crypto lobby group, you're getting more for your money. And they don't understand why it's important to be with a Bitcoin only organization. So we try and put forward policies and suggestions and consultations and open letters to educate policymakers on the differences, why Bitcoin's special and why it should be treated differently. And I think we have made some progress, although it's exceptionally slow. I mean, like, fighting the blob and the bureaucracy is just insane.
It's really hard. It's interesting that you made mention of the sort of Bitcoin only aspect, because I met the people that kind of put together Stand with Crypto, which is obviously a movement, like a sort of a lobby group in the United States, which was then, came across the pond to the UK, very much aligned with Coinbase, etc. It's good for the industry in general that there are lobby groups doing that, but like you say, there is if you really go deep, there's a fundamental difference between what Bitcoin is as a monetary protocol and the rest of the blockchain protocols out there and what they do. But to be honest, it's probably better to have more people lobbying for the industry, but we're purists and we lean more towards, you know, the Bitcoin side of things. So that's a juggling act for you. We had Freddie New on yesterday, and he kind of stepped away from Bitcoin Policy UK to, you know, move on to other things. Do you want to talk a little bit about the support or lack of support that you've had, and perhaps for the audience out there listening, how they might be get involved to help you keep doing what you're doing with Bitcoin Policy UK?
The problem is I've worked for 3 years unpaid, and there comes a point when you can't do it anymore. And Freddie had to earn money as well, and so that's why he's working on a brilliant company with Lightning infrastructure, because payments is almost an essential part of the Bitcoin story, because it's a peer-to-peer cash. So what he's doing will further the cause in a better way, almost, where he can actually pay his mortgage, which is really important. So when people come and ask us for help, you've still got to manage that help. I was managing a team of 14 volunteers, and unfortunately that's best endeavours. So if somebody's got their family, and then they've got their real work, and then they do their volunteer work. So filling in those gaps is really difficult, and until we get funding, I think it's just going to be a best endeavours basis, where we'll do the policy responses that are meaningful, like we did one on stable coins just recently, trying to argue that Bitcoin should be treated like stable coins in terms of payments, and you shouldn't trigger a capital gains event if you're buying a cup of coffee. Things like that we will still be moving forward, but we wanted to become a think tank, help with research, have a tax working group, and work on mining proof of concepts. All of that's had to be parked.
Yeah.
So we had lots of different ideas and lots of different initiatives, but without money and resources, it's very difficult to drive it forward.
Yeah. Well, I hope that some people do come to the party. You're very well respected in the industry, and you'd hope people like Adam Back and Blockstream or whatever would come and just...
I think they like treasury companies.
Say again?
I think they like treasury companies.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And this is another problem that I've realised, is a lot of people say that they want to help, but when you actually reach out and ask them, they go to projects that
make them money and don't necessarily do what needs to be done to take Bitcoin forward. Misaligned incentives.
It all comes back to incentives, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Let's talk about the conference and just like the general trend of Bitcoin treasury companies. Michael Saylor's been the talk of the town like the last 2 weeks, selling some Bitcoin last week, then buying a load more the following week. You've been one of the more vocal critics of Bitcoin treasury companies, and I think it's great to have dissenting voices or critics or people that just ask questions, right? Because for a long time it's like, if you don't agree with this, we'll just shut you out. But that's not how the world works. And if we don't have people asking the right questions, we'll never ask the right questions. And then when things go wrong, everyone looks back in hindsight and they're like, well, why didn't anyone say anything?
Exactly.
And then you can put up your hand and be like, well, I did.
Yeah.
And I did my job. But tell me why you think Bitcoin treasury companies are perhaps not a good thing for Bitcoin.
So I think there's 3 different types of treasury company. Like, obviously there's lots of different financial engineering around it, but I'll just break it down to 3 different ways that I view them. So if you want to put Bitcoin on your balance sheet with cash, I think that's obviously one of the most sensible things that you can do with cash.
Yeah.
But then you have all the different layers of financial engineering. So you could dilute your shareholders, you issue more stock, you sell it, you dilute your shareholders, you raise money, you buy Bitcoin. Well, that's almost the opposite of why we like Bitcoin. We like Bitcoin because it can't be inflated, because of its scarcity. That's what makes it special. So moving this into like the fiat games world, where you are just playing the same games that kind of screw people over, except you're using Bitcoin's reputation to give it credibility, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. And then you've got the leverage aspect of it. This is kind of what Saylor does a lot of, borrowing very cheap money, buying Bitcoin and using leverage. So I think people don't really understand the different risk profiles of the treasury companies.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you just have to put Bitcoin on your balance sheet and you can be considered a Bitcoin. So you could be a hairdresser, or you could be an osteopath. You could be anything, and you could be a Bitcoin treasury company. So even that term, in my opinion, is completely meaningless.
Yes.
And really, they've only been around for 18 months.
Yeah.
They haven't even seen a whole cycle. And most of the treasury companies that we've seen, they're almost like meme coin pump and dump schemes. You just look at the chart, it goes up to some crazy amount, comes back down, and then that's it. It doesn't recover.
Yeah.
And when you think about how early it is, you know, the first time we saw Meta Planet, it was 18 months ago.
Yeah.
We haven't weathered anything yet. We don't know how it's going to play out, but we have lots of people on stage telling you that it's the best way, arguing over whose yield is bigger. You know, it just seems really silly to me that nobody's actually thinking it through. They're just almost buying the hype.
Yeah, well, I watched Michael Saylor's interview with Danny Knowles, and I thought that he was really unfair, like in the way that he went at Danny, because Danny literally asked that question. You know, are there one too many Bitcoin treasury companies? And you know, and it's a fair question. Like they all copied the playbook. They're all doing the same thing, but these companies are not, you know, like doing something. You know, and this is why I like Freddie and B Hodl, for example. It's a company that went public. They acquired some Bitcoin with the money that they raised, but they kept a significant cash portion to run a business, and the business is running Bitcoin Lightning infrastructure. It's great for the Bitcoin network. It's great for helping Bitcoin, you know, finally become a better payment network. And they're holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So as you say, a Bitcoin treasury company that's just using Bitcoin as a store of value and a part of their balance sheet holdings, but they're actually running a business.
Yep.
And Danny Knowles' kind of question was like, man, a lot of these guys just copied your playbook and they're just, you know, issuing convertible notes, borrowing money and buying Bitcoin, but they're not really doing anything, and it's not sustainable for most of them.
No.
I think it's fair to say that Michael Saylor started all this, right? He pioneered it in like 2021, when he's like, I've got $200 million on my balance sheet. I know that it's losing its purchasing power every year. I need to find a superior asset. He was like, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. And when that happened, that was great, right? Because MicroStrategy is still a software services company. It's selling software.
Although the software is a bit shit. I've used it.
But
I mean, we called it micro tragedy when we were using it. Though.
But that's okay. It's still a business, right? Like they were still doing something meaningful, and they were adding some value. Whether or not you think it's valuable is subjective. But what it was then was very different to what it is now. And Jack Mallers actually said this to me yesterday, or on Thursday when we had him on the show here, was that like he's not sure that the evolution of what Saylor is doing is good, and it was probably better 2 or 3 years ago, because now, exactly as you said, he's constantly juggling. Do I sell some Bitcoin to meet my dividend obligations? Do I dilute MSTR shareholders more? I mean, I hold some MSTR shares, and I'm like down really bad. I don't really care, but like as a shareholder, it's like this is not what I thought it was going to be 2 years ago, you know? So it changed into something very different. And if we don't ask these questions, like people are just going to accept and just think that everything's fine and dandy, but it's very complicated financial engineering, and at some point, something's not going to go well.
And when it goes bad, I think it could happen very quickly, and it could be very dramatic. And it's the risk that I'm uncomfortable with. I don't think the risk is explained.
Yeah.
So I think Saylor put out a video talking about his yield with, is it Strive?
Yeah. STRC.
STRC.
Yeah. Stretch.
A Stretch. That's it. I get confused. Like all the names are so similar.
Well, there's 5 different ones. So, but yeah, like Stretch is the 11.5% yield now. Yeah,
and
the
he did
perpetual.
A weird little video, didn't he? Did you see that weird little video? And it was making out like there was no risk involved, and I thought it was really dishonest. Actually,
yeah, it's disingenuous to say there's no risk involved. There is risk.
There's a lot of risk, and because it's quite a new concept, we just haven't seen it play out, and I just think it could be very bad. But I've still got MicroStrategy shares. Yeah. In actual fact, because I don't earn enough money, actually, it's kept me going. So like, I actually have a lot to thank Saylor for.
High five. We're in the red together.
Yeah. No, I'm not actually. I'm up because I bought it in 2020.
Ah, okay. Well,
in a tax-free ISA.
Okay. Oh, amazing. Okay, that's crazy. So you're way early. Way early.
I'm probably about 100% up, but I was about 600% up, and I didn't cash in at that point. So I feel like I've lost because I could have made even more. But at the same time, I'm still happy with the gains.
The thing is, maybe he'll prove us wrong. And the long-term thesis, right, is that Bitcoin appreciates by, on average, 30% every year on year. he will perpetually be able to pay his dividends. MSTR's share price will go up drastically as the price of Bitcoin goes up, and then things should be equaled out. And I think that's the hardest thing right now is like we're in the depths of a bear market. It's pretty bad. And they just need to survive until the price appreciates again.
I've actually got faith in MicroStrategy. It's probably the only one that I do.
Yeah.
Even though I'm critical of it,
yeah.
I think it'll be the one that does survive. I don't have much faith in any of the other ones, really. I just think when you're a copycat, you're not gonna, copycats never really work out. They tend to fail. And because he was the first one and he was pioneering, I think that it probably will be okay.
But that, like, I like that you're a shareholder as well, because it means that, like, hey, I'm a shareholder and I can hold you to account and I can ask questions, and I think not enough people do. And from all the, like, we were supposed to have Michael Saylor on the stream yesterday, and a couple of days ago they turned it down. To be fair to him, I just don't think he can move around very easily anymore. Like, as the most prominent person in Bitcoin, like if he walks around here, there's just the entire hall is going to follow him and try and take photos. It's also a massive security risk because they have 800K or more Bitcoin. If anything happens to him, what happens? You know? And I mean, like, this is something I want to ask him when I interview him. Like, what happens to all the Bitcoin when you die? Like, who takes over your strategy? Who, you know, like, have you even thought about these things? You know, because he's kind of said like he'll get. I don't even know. We don't know what he'd do with the Bitcoin, but now it's part of a part of a corporation. So it's kind of, it's not his Bitcoin.
That is, he's got personal Bitcoin and corporation Bitcoin, but him dying is another huge risk. Not because he may not have thought about it after, but it's because I think a lot of people that work at his company aren't necessarily Bitcoiners. They are just working at his company. So will the next person who takes over have the same conviction? Probably not.
I don't think so. But then you look at guys like Jack. There's a few other people in the industry that I think could do it right. And like, to be fair to Michael Saylor, I didn't work in corporate finance for 30 years. He built a company during the dot-com bubble, right? Like, he's been through it all. He's been in corporate finance for a really long time. So like, I'm not an expert on that, and I'm not going to sit here and say I know more than him. I don't. And he's built these amazing, he's been innovative. I think he's done a lot for the industry, but we should ask questions. I've got Richard Byworth waiting in the sidelines there. Susie, thank you so much for chatting to us and catching up. Like, keep doing the good work in the UK. We need more people, more strong journalists that are doing, you know, the good work for Bitcoin, but also challenging politicians and policymakers who just don't understand what this is, so that we do move things in the right direction. It's a great pleasure. If you don't follow Susie online, at @DecentraSuze on X as well, you'll find her. One of my favorite people in the industry. Suze, thank you very much. We'll be back in a couple of minutes' time. Don't go away.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Starting Block. We've been broadcasting live from BTC Prague over the last 3 days. This is the final session. I've got a flight to catch a little bit later, but I promise you this is going to be the best conversation of the entire week, because the conversation we just had off air with Richard Byworth has been fascinating to say the least, and I think we have a lot of the same sensibilities and beliefs in the problems in the world and the potential for Bitcoin and a few other freedom technologies and tools to help us solve that. So first things first, Richard Byworth, it's great to finally meet you in person and sit across the table and have a conversation. I've been following you for a long time. I love the content that you put out on X as well. For people out there that don't know who you are, can you give us a brief sort of background of who you are, what you've done, and how you came to Bitcoin?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth, and good to finally meet you too. So I was originally a capital markets banker. I was focused on the derivative side of the capital markets, so anything convertible bonds, flow derivatives like options, futures, Delta One products, so even Strike, the perpetual equity, preferred equity from Strategy. These types of things we traded on my desk. We traded with hedge funds all day long. So I've been a hedge fund either trader against hedge funds, salesman to hedge funds, syndicator to hedge funds, or structuring products for hedge funds my whole career. I moved into crypto in 2017, ran a crypto company, and within a year ended up becoming a Bitcoin maxi. And that was a real problem for me from a values perspective, because once you understand Bitcoin, you realize that everything else in the space is pretty much a scam. And I was running a company that had an exchange, it had a custody solution, an OTC trading desk, and we also had a fund of crypto hedge funds, which was the one part of the business that I have continued to focus on and remain focused on in my future businesses. And so I really wanted to get out of the business, but I'd taken a lot of investor money, and so what we ended up doing was listing the company on NASDAQ through a SPAC transaction. We raised money in COVID through a very nicely structured convertible bond for private investors to come in. So essentially all the investors made very good money going into the listing. The listing traded up to about an 800 million valuation. Then Coinbase listed and it became more challenging, because just like today we're seeing with SpaceX having liquidity sucked out of the market, Coinbase sucked liquidity out of the market.
Yeah.
And we were the stock was coming off. Binance approached us to buy the company. My board really wanted to go ahead with Binance. I said, guys, I'm no way getting involved with Binance. I'm out. And so that was when I stepped back from the company.
Okay.
And then when it got announced on Bloomberg, the first call I got was from Mark Sees, who ran Sees Capital. And he asked me to look after the hedge fund business, which was $1 billion business for them. And so I said, look, I think very happy to do so, but I want to make sure that we focus in this space, particularly on Bitcoin, but I think the trajectory to do so is to launch a fund of crypto hedge funds. Mm-hmm. We did that very successfully, it worked well, but then what we did a year and a half later was launch a Bitcoin-denominated fund of crypto hedge funds, which within 6 months became the biggest product globally doing that, with 600 million under management. So it was very, very successful. We launched a Swiss Bitcoin treasury company called Future. I do a lot of work in the Bitcoin treasury company space and assessing, obviously, the capital market strategies around that, and who are the most effective in doing so, and why value presents itself in different ways in different companies. So I had a very nice playbook for Switzerland. Switzerland's got a zero interest rate environment. So, excuse me.
That's all right.
We decided that Switzerland needed a Bitcoin treasury company. Launching that company ended up leading to an issue with the board of Sees Capital and Sees Group. So we decided to leave the company and start up our own company, which is now an amalgamation of our two names, Byworth and Sees. So yeah. B's partners, BYZ.
BYZ, that's how I was going to say it, but yeah. I was obviously wrong.
So it's B's as in the, yeah. And so we relaunched the fund in October. all the 90% of the original investors are coming over because obviously they want to be with real Bitcoiners and people that understand hedge fund allocation. So that's really what it is. The product's designed to have a very, very low volatility. So it's a bit like a stretch equivalent in the Bitcoin yield space.
Okay.
So we aim for a volatility of 1 to 2 and a yield of about 3 to 8% across different hedge fund strategies. And we think in a bad market environment, we can probably make 3%, which we proved. I mean, 2025 was not the greatest environment. It was very choppy. But we were running at 4.5% net of all fees. There's no management fee on the product and it's performance fee only. So Bitcoin is like alignment, you know.
Yeah.
We don't make money if you don't make money. So that's really the philosophy of the whole thing.
Beautiful. I believe you had Michael Saylor on a podcast a while back. Is that correct?
That's not true, no. So I used to run a podcast called Seize the Future.
Yeah.
We had a Bitcoin treasury segment of that.
Yeah.
But I always insisted in doing it in person.
Yes.
And Saylor and I never managed to line
Align.
up in terms of physical. So we were trying to get him to Switzerland to do a presentation to some of our investors. But we were going to do it again this year. So that would have been when we did the podcast. But by that time I left and we stopped the podcast. But I'll relaunch the podcast and it will also have that secondary track into Bitcoin treasury companies.
Yeah, I think, it's important that you get back to that because you're really good at it.
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the podcasts that went very viral was Simon Jerovich because we really dug into the various capital market strategies that they employ. Simon's an ex-Goldman guy, so he and I really think the same way and speak the same language. But I would say, you know, I'm quite good at simplifying technical structures. And, you know, I wasn't the best trader, but I was very good at sales for that exact reason. So
it's kind of like a journalist. If you can break down complex topics in layman's terms and make it easy to digest, it's a skill that most don't have. That was actually the podcast I was referring to. And Meta Planet is a very fascinating kind of like edge case because of the landscape in Japan and the way that the rules they had around Bitcoin. I think they just like very, very interesting way for that Bitcoin treasury company in that country to dominate the market and trade as it has. I wanted to get your general thoughts on Bitcoin treasury companies because, you know, the conversation we had off air, you definitely seem very libertarian in your thinking. There's a lot of Bitcoiners that still uphold and maintain those values. And there are lots that argue that the institutionalization of Bitcoin isn't necessarily good for Bitcoin, and perhaps where we're going with strategy and these big companies acquiring huge amount of Bitcoin using leverage and debt might not be such a good thing. How do you weigh those two up?
So you're right. I am very libertarian in my thinking. I think lesser government is the trajectory that we all need to be aiming towards, and we can talk about my sort of latest thinking about this later. But, you know, what Bitcoiners, the purest Bitcoiners, don't necessarily understand is, you know, my goal, like many other Bitcoiners' goal, is that Bitcoin becomes the unit of account. Bitcoin cannot become the unit of account without institutional adoption. And what Saylor is doing, whether you love it or hate it, you have to understand that he is providing a fiat spigot or valve out of the fiat financial markets into Bitcoin. He's basically just turning on all the different capital pools, be it convertible bonds, equity, fixed income. I mean, I don't know if you saw his keynote yesterday. He's got that matrix of all the different capital pools, but he's been talking about this since 2020. Like, he understands very clearly, as someone with my background understands, that you have very segmented capital in the financial markets. So, for example, you'll have convertible bond capital and credit capital. So credit capital as a market is much bigger than convertible bonds. So we had situations in Asia when I was trading there where the convertible bond would trade cheaper on a credit implied basis than the actual bond, even though it's got a free option embedded in it. And that was purely a result of the capital. Like, convert bond guys can't buy the credit guys can't buy the
buy it.
convertible bond. Credit guys have more money, so the credit trades tighter in the credit market.
Yeah.
So it was simply that. So you, of course, have hedge funds that can sit in the middle and arbitrage these things, but often they would get out of whack
Yes.
because of those capital pools. And this is what Saylor understood very early. And so he's tapping all those different capital pools. For us to get to that point of the full financialization, the full Bitcoin as a unit of account, we need everybody to adopt Bitcoin. That's even people we hate, politicians, doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, everybody needs to adopt Bitcoin because we want Bitcoin as the unit of account, the base money. And frankly, without being rude to anyone, if you don't believe that the 800 trillion of capital sitting in capital markets is not a worthy target of Bitcoinization, then you're being naive.
Yeah.
You're being naive, I'm afraid. And look, I completely agree that everybody has to have at least some of their Bitcoin in cold storage.
Yeah.
Right? It's again, as a Bitcoiner, you're thinking about capital allocation. So have a portion of your Bitcoin in cold storage. But you also might want to borrow against your Bitcoin and leverage your Bitcoin, and buying a Bitcoin ETF through a private bank allows you to get about 65% leverage on your Bitcoin. If you do it with a Bitcoin treasury company, you already have embedded leverage in that. And so it's another form of that trade. So for the individual, these are different capital allocation options. Our fund is a different allocation option, right? So if you're a Bitcoiner, you've got to think of your Bitcoin as capital. You can be purely like, I don't ever want to do anything with my Bitcoin. That's fine too.
Yeah.
But if you're an investor like me or other people involved in the financial markets, then you want to be seeing where you can allocate that Bitcoin to get different return profiles. And of course, the Bitcoin in cold storage is your cash allocation.
Yes.
Right? And I'm very much of the opinion that everybody should have at least an allocation to Bitcoin in cold storage, because that's the freedom solution. And this sort of leads into the conversation that we were having earlier, if you want to potentially go there.
I do want to go there. I mean, I've asked a lot of people about the Bitcoin treasury sort of arc, and I think you summed it up very well. Like, some people fundamentally disagree with it and they don't think it's very much part of the Bitcoin ethos, but I always point back to a conversation I had with Jack Mallers last year at Bitcoin Vegas, where he said to me, we don't get to choose how people use Bitcoin, and it's money for people in a circular economy, that are grappling with hyperinflation, and it's pristine capital for digital credit, which Michael Saylor and co are doing, and the two are not mutually exclusive. They can exist in the same thing because the Bitcoin protocol is what it is. So
if I could just add one
ahead.
thing to that, I think, we as real Bitcoiners that believe in Bitcoin with our heart, for all the various other things apart from necessarily number go up, a lot of people point to Saylor and go, well, he's going to end up owning 10% of the Bitcoin, right? Well, that's down to us.
Yeah.
Because if we educate everybody well enough, people won't sell their Bitcoin to Saylor.
Yeah.
Right? So if he can't buy it at these prices, he's not going to end up with the same percentage allocation. People keep selling it to him, he's going to keep buying it. So, we have a job of education. It's not us to criticize him.
Yeah.
It's us to educate everybody else. Don't sell your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? What's coming with everything that we're going to talk about is going to lead to hyper-Bitcoinization.
Yeah.
Right? And we need to make sure that enough people, enough innocents in this whole thing understand Bitcoin well enough that they are not going to get kicked off the train when we start running.
Yeah. Let's talk about that now. I mean, I'm from South Africa. I moved to Europe in 2022. And part of the reason we left South Africa is my wife and I felt that, when we have kids, we are worried about their long-term future in South Africa, the value of the South African rand, political instability, safety, all these kind of things you weigh up. And you're like, maybe we should go and live somewhere else for a while and see if there's a better future for us and our family and future generations. Lived in the Netherlands for 4 years. I like living in the Netherlands. You pay a lot of tax. conversely, you get what you pay for to a large extent, but things are very quickly becoming dystopian. You know, there's been talk of these unrealized capital gains that they want to instill. There was a big pushback. They said, we'll go back to the drawing board. And then about a month ago, there was again, like, they might continue on with what they wanted to do in the first place. And it's, you know, for the middle class, that's where it hurts you the most, because you might not necessarily have 50,000 euros in the bank to pay the tax on the unrealized gains. You haven't sold your assets. You don't want to sell your assets. But the government is saying to you, hey, those assets have appreciated in value every year. Give us our tax. But you haven't even realized the capital gain yourself. But they're saying, no, that doesn't matter. You need to pay for us. So you don't have the cash to pay for that. So you have to sell some of the assets to pay your tax bill. And slowly over time, over 10 years, you might lose all of your invested assets, all of the money that you've been trying to save up for yourself and your family, or the assets, are gone because the state is like, you need to pay us tax on something that you didn't even want to sell in the first place, you know? So the Bitcoiners in the Netherlands were probably the most vocal when this happened. And the truth is, the rule is not just at Bitcoin, it's all investable assets. So if you're just a mega Tesla bull and you have a load of Tesla stock, the government, if it comes into to pass in 2028, is going to knock on your door every year and say, where's the unrealized capital gains, you know? I don't want to live there if that's the case. And this is how this conversation came up off air. Like, I do worry about the directionality in which Europe and the world is going. It does feel like it's going towards communism in some sort of way, and I fundamentally don't believe that that works. And history has proved that for us. How do you feel about all of this, and where does Bitcoin fit into the picture for you?
Well, look, I'm originally from the UK, so I watch what's happening in the UK with real sadness. You know, we have a government and a compromised media that is trying to focus people on certain narratives. The propaganda is extremely strong. If you go to the UK right now and ask anybody about Trump or Elon Musk, for them they're evil people. They're what's bad about society. Whereas this is very clearly a contrived narrative by the authoritarian government who are trying to suppress free speech. Right? And why are they doing that? They're doing that because everything that's happening is a result of money printing, which is degrading society overall. And I think that this is a massive problem. Unfortunately, it always leads to the same thing. They have to suppress free speech because people like you and me will be out there telling people this is actually the government's fault. This is, you know, the result of overprinting money, over indebtedness, too much big government, all these problems. So they're now doing the counter narrative to try and, you know, as much as they can protect the money printing so that they can keep going. And that leads to more and more control, more and more reduction of freedom of speech. And so all of these things that you're talking about, they essentially look and smell and like communism. That's what it is. And so to your point about the taxes, you're exactly right. The taxation is designed to bleed the middle class because that's the largest proportion of the money. Obviously, the sort of the working class and the people on the poverty line are already screwed. So the middle class takes out an even bigger segment. So if you pull all of them down into poverty by overtaxation, then they will become reliant on the state. It becomes self-perpetuating that they're always going to keep voting for the handout, the money. Tax the rich, so then they can go after the billionaires that remain, right? If they remain, I doubt they will. But we see it in the UK. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to UK families and wealthy people in the UK, and even as of 2-3 years ago, every single one of them had a plan to leave or already were leaving. So there's obviously the non-domicile residency that you had in the UK. There was a certain amount of tax you just pay annually, and that was it, flat rate. Then they introduced full taxation on those people, and of course, those people are extremely mobile and moved to places like Madrid, Milan, Switzerland, as well as Dubai, Abu Dhabi. And so you're going to see that. But the point that you made about unrealized capital gains tax and you saying, okay, by 2028 we want to leave. Well, the problem is they're going to try and shut the door before that.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what you've got to be very careful about. So I worry about holding a UK passport. I do think that they're going to implement global taxation, because what voter is going to vote against taxing a guy living in Hong Kong that is a UK passport holder only paying 15% tax over that? Well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
So we should take some of that money and feed all these people that we've impoverished through overtaxation and irresponsible government policy. So it's just an ever-decreasing sort of cycle that wipes out more and more people into the poverty line. And I think the good thing about what happened with COVID was it woke up a lot of people. A lot of people said, okay, this policy doesn't make any sense. This is basically just a flu or an extreme flu for older people. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we need to put face masks on our children and limit the amount of education they can have or socialization that they can have with children. So I think this opened a lot of people's eyes to just incompetent or corrupt government.
Yeah.
Corrupt because they were taking money from the pharmaceutical companies to implement. So you can look at it either way. It doesn't really matter. One way or the other, the government's either stupid or corrupt. So we know that these policies don't make sense, as you've said, from a historical perspective. Now, I think this actually opens the door to the point that we were talking about before around Bitcoin adoption and not letting Saylor buy 10% of the Bitcoin. I think anyone that understands Bitcoin has to understand that the more Bitcoiners we create, the better for the network. It's a network effect thing. So we've all been trying to orange pill people throughout our Bitcoin journey. I've spent 8 years trying to orange pill people. And if you think about the narrative that people are generally the most interested in, it's number go up.
Yeah.
The number go up is a good way to orange pill people, that's for sure, when the number is going up. However, when things are flat or down, this becomes a much harder exercise.
Yes.
And I think what all this government corruption or incompetence is doing is leading towards the much stronger orange pill narrative. And that is, by defunding fiat, by opting out of fiat and buying Bitcoin with your fiat, you essentially defund the government. They can't just sit there printing money that only they are using, right? If everybody's opted out of the system, peaceful protest, that's the cleanest, most peaceful way that you can protest what's happening. Because frankly, as I'm sure you're experiencing in Holland, with the amount of people that are becoming more and more impoverished, they're more just because they don't understand the way the system works, they're more likely to keep voting for the handouts, for the benefits, and more socialist dynamic. And this is what the Biden administration were trying to continue. And obviously, you know, the more people you impoverish or the more poor people you bring into the country, the more likely you can do this. So I believe very strongly that our responsibility of Bitcoiners is to now push the narrative towards people that if you don't believe in what's happening in your country, in Western Europe, opt out of it, start buying Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin with a portion of your paycheck every month. I'm not going to suggest what people should do on a taxation declaration basis, but you know, obviously what happened in France is a lesson to a lot of people, where the tax office released names and addresses of Bitcoiners to criminals in the dark web. So you know, you've got to think about levels of security, and I'm very encouraged that here at this conference you're seeing more and more people offering security services in different ways to people. I think that's really important. Because people need to understand these things if they want to. Because at the end of the day, once the government starts becoming defunded, they're going to realize that the escape route is Bitcoin. I mean, Christine Lagarde's been saying this for ages. We don't like Bitcoin because it's an escape route. I always used to say, escape route from what, Christine? Like what? What are you trying to implement? But she actually said that. And so these people, they're very transparent with what they're going to do. And so You know, the ECB wrote a paper, I think it was about 2 years ago, about how you should hate Bitcoiners because they got there early.
Yes.
And you shouldn't.
I was telling Jordan, my producer, about this in the car today.
Yeah, you shouldn't buy Bitcoin. You should actually complain to your government representative that it's unfair. And I think this is where this whole socialism, communism problem comes from. It's a different focus on fairness.
Yeah.
Right? You've got fairness as in, well, everybody should have a piece. Or fairness as in, you work hard, you get what you deserve.
Yes.
And ultimately, you work hard, you get what you deserve is the model that works because it creates creation. It creates productivity. It drives people into that endeavor. If people don't have a safety net, they have to get out and do stuff.
Yeah.
Right? All we're doing with this model is incentivizing people to sit on a sofa and vote for more and more handouts.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's the direction that we will go. And as I said, that leads to more authoritarian approach because people like you and me, they don't want talking. And so we get closed down, we get canceled in social media or whatever. And then you get debanked and all these horrible things. So, you know, quiet protest is Bitcoin.
Yeah. And just to your point as well, I think South Africa was a good example of this. After apartheid ended and the ANC government, took over the country and the government, under Nelson Mandela, everyone was happy, things were going well. But slowly over time, the ANC themselves, which is modeled on, it's a socialist party, they, over time, kept their voter base beholden on them. So they didn't, I mean, I don't know whether it was by design or not, but the education system didn't get better. The healthcare system didn't get a lot better. So people couldn't uplift themselves out of the poverty that was, to be fair, created by the apartheid system and the way that, things were done. But the ANC failed to uplift people. But at the same time, that ensured that every 4 years, a significant percentage of the country voted them into power because they needed the social grants, they needed the support of the government because they simply couldn't look after themselves because, yes, partly because of apartheid, but you can't keep blaming that forever. And at some point, the current government should have done better to educate people, but the more educated you become, the more questions you ask, and then suddenly you realize that, hey, these guys are corrupt, they're not running the country well. So it's this perpetual cycle where you don't want to improve things because you want to keep people beholden to you because you want to stay in power, and that's just one microcosm of how that played out. And then just to the point of Bitcoin and its value, for me, a lot of people, ask you that, like, what's the fundamental value of Bitcoin? What makes Bitcoin trade at $60,000? What would make it be worth $1 million in terms of, if we wanted to actually trade it? And the truth is, because it's uncensorable and unconfiscable if you do it in the right way, that's the value of Bitcoin. No one controls it. No one can take it from you. And when things get really dystopian and like the lights don't go off, at least, you can still transfer value with people, and frankly, no one can even know how much Bitcoin you have because you could, memorize your seed phrase and just move around the world and be able to transfer value without ever being a part of the system. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. They don't quite understand what the technology is and the beauty of what it is. Secured by computation and electricity, pretty much impossible now to hack because of the hash rate. So incredibly secure network and not controlled by anyone, not dependent on any one central party to issue or move the money around. That's the beauty of Bitcoin, and that's why it can help us sort of escape this fiat nightmare that we're in.
But I think, Saylor always says Bitcoin is hope. Yeah. And I really believe that is the truth of the discussion we're having. Like, if I was living in the UK now and I didn't have Bitcoin, I would be despondent. You're completely trapped.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to escape this horrible system? But because you have Bitcoin, you see a way that you can potentially, A, increase your wealth significantly, but B, to your point, have freedom of movement because you can just be like, I'm out.
I'm gone.
And I think this is, we talked about, a lot of the orange pilling focus is number go up. Now I think the orange pill focus should be freedom go up. And it should be focused on Europe and other authoritarian regimes because even Switzerland is not immune to this. Like at the beginning of the Ukraine war, Switzerland was forced out of neutrality by the EU to provide weapons to Ukraine. That wasn't voted for.
Yeah.
That wasn't anything Swiss voters would have accepted, because neutrality was one of the very differentiating factors of Switzerland. But the EU has enormous power over Switzerland, as they demonstrated with COVID. I mean, Switzerland, again, without any kind of proper referendum, they implemented COVID vaccine mandates and passports for going into restaurants. Unfortunately, they were quite lax on how it was implemented. But very interestingly, landing in Switzerland, the majority, I would say 95% of the people I know, did not get vaccinated. So it shows you that Switzerland has a freedom mentality, but the problem is that the EU is encroaching on Switzerland. As we talked about before, it's surrounded by Germany, France, Italy, and it has open borders with them. So, and again, by decree of the EU.
Yeah.
So there was a very interesting vote that just happened in Switzerland, capping the population at 10 million.
Okay.
So that means that once we get close to that 10 million number, if the government implement the voters' request, if the voters vote for the 10 million cap, it means that they have to renegotiate their status with the EU, because we can't have an open border system with Schengen.
Yeah.
So for me, that's one way of resisting the EU. But as I said before, the power of the EU is so great on Switzerland and its economy that I'm sure that even if the country votes in favor of the 10 million cap, we will end up finding some back way that the EU continues to maintain control over Switzerland, sadly. So, you know, you need to think about options. You need to look at different countries. We talked about this before. I think Latin America is very interesting. Latin America is a freedom-focused continent in many countries. I think they've all had bad experiences with communism or debasement of money to ridiculous situations.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of learning there. And I think, you know, just philosophically, it's a different type of continent, a bit like South Africa and what you were explaining earlier about South Africa. So for me, it seems like an interesting place to pay attention to, and I think everyone in Western Europe needs to be thinking what's going to happen when the revolution comes, because we've already started to see signs of this.
Yeah.
Last weekend we saw someone with an attempted beheading on the streets of Northern Ireland. I mean, Keir Starmer can go out and call people racist and don't be alarmist and the rest of it, but if I was sat there with my children, having them witness potentially a public beheading, I'm like, I'm not very happy with the implementation of criminal justice. That's the problem. A lot of people say, oh, it's a racial problem, it's too much immigration. Yeah, okay, uncontrolled immigration has to some degree led to this, but implementing criminal justice is what our government should be doing, and they're not doing it for fear of being called racist or whatever other reason they have behind it, some level of corruption, I'm not sure what it is, or complete incompetence and just worrying about being called racist.
Yeah.
As I said before, it's a model that isn't working. It will continue to fail. It's headed in that direction, and unfortunately, the only way they can continue is to stymie free speech and implement more authoritarian control.
Yeah. It's crazy, and we'll wrap up from here, but in my mind, it's just crazy that all these countries that we all come from and held very dear and had a sense of patriotism for has changed so much in such a short period of time. And it's kind of like, we shouldn't be sitting here having a conversation with someone who lives in Switzerland like, I'm worried about the state of Switzerland, I'm going to go and move somewhere else, you know, because it's supposed to be one of these bastions of sort of freedom and privacy and, you know, wealth and sovereignty, and it's not.
The problem is that it's gradually and then suddenly. It's like Bitcoin, right? Like, the problem is when it happens, it's going to be very fast.
Yeah.
And I would love to believe that Switzerland can be resistant from the EU, but they've only demonstrated that they can't resist.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing that I have concerns about.
Yeah.
And so you've just got to be always. If you understand all these things and you're not thinking about other options for your family, that's just negligence.
It is
negligence towards your family.
And like, I mean, not to go too hard on the Bitcoin orange pill, and I'll finish with this. It's just like, even Tim Draper says it. He's like, you want Bitcoin when the US dollar collapses or the system collapses, because it's literally, you know, even if you own a load of property, if the state that you're, the government or the whatever in the country that you're in gets all draconian, like, yeah, you've got the title deeds to your land, they've got an army and guys with guns. Sorry, that doesn't belong to you. But part of a completely decentralized network with a sort of, you know, unit of account in it, you can own that and no one can take it from you.
I met a Jewish Bitcoiner in Nashville in 24. And he was telling me that the wealthiest Jews in Nazi Germany were the Jews that stayed behind, because they had the houses, the paintings, the gold. They couldn't move.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, it's going to get better. I know the mayor. I'll be okay. They made all these excuses. They didn't have Bitcoin. They couldn't just get out.
Yeah, precisely. Richard, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's like hugely enlightening and gives people a glimpse of the kind of people that are at this conference and that make up, you know, the Bitcoin ecosystem. The block obviously covers the wider cryptocurrency ecosystem, but that's why I wanted to come here. I'm a big proponent and advocate for Bitcoin, and I hope that it's been enlightening for our audience out there. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us for the stream here at BTC Prague. We're going to wrap things up right now. So thank you very much for joining us. If you enjoyed the conversations, like and retweet. Please follow at BTC Prague on X. If you're interested in coming to the conference, come next year. They're moving to a new amazing venue. Martin showed us behind the scenes what that's going to look like. So it's definitely something that you want to be involved in next year. And of course, if you don't already, please follow the block, like and retweet this broadcast, and keep an eye out on our social media. We'll be doing more of this across the industry in different countries as well. And if you see us around, come and say hello in person. But thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.